My son-in-law, Edward, a man who saw the world as a machine and people as its cogs, called me useless. He said it with the flat, dispassionate finality of an engineer condemning a faulty part. He looked at my hands, once so capable, and now gnarled with arthritis, at my body, once so strong, and now frail and slow. And he rendered his verdict. I no longer served a function. I was a broken component, taking up space, consuming resources, contributing nothing to the efficient running of his home. He only began to question his judgment when he started seeing my smile in every mirror he looked into. Not a joyful smile. Not a smile. Just a quiet, placid, knowing smile, superimposed over his own reflection, a useless, silent, and utterly inescapable presence. Hi everyone, I am Grandma Sylvia. My name is Sylvia Clark. I am 81 years old, and for 45 of those years I was a nurse. A trauma nurse, in a busy city hospital. My life was a testament to usefulness. My hands have dressed wounds, started IVs, held the hands of the dying, and helped bring new life into the world. My mind was a finely tuned instrument of diagnosis and care. My purpose was etched into the very core of my being, to be of use, to help, to fix, to serve. This is a story about what happens when a useful person is deemed useless. It is a story about how a smile, the most basic expression of human connection, can become a haunting. And it is the story of how a man who worshipped at the altar of utility was driven to the brink of madness by something with no function at all. This is a quiet story, a story that unfolds in the reflective surfaces of a modern home. It is a secret I have held, a silent, smiling ghost in my own heart. Because how do you explain such a thing? How do you tell someone that your own quiet, broken spirit has learned to reflect itself in the eyes of your tormentor? But it happened. And it was a smile he could not look away from. Before I show you that smile, I ask for a moment of your time. Please, like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your presence, your act of bearing witness, affirms my existence. It proves to me that I am not invisible, that I am not useless. And that gives me more strength than you can possibly imagine. To understand the smile in the mirror, you must first understand the woman I was, before the smile became my only weapon. I was not born a quiet woman. I was born into a world of action, of purpose. As a trauma nurse, my life was a series of critical, useful tasks. I thrived on the pressure, on the constant, urgent need to be competent, to be efficient, to be the calm, steady hand in the chaos of the emergency room. My life had a clear, undeniable function. I was a fixer of broken bodies. My husband, Michael, was a firefighter. We were a matched set, a pair of public servants who understood each other's worlds of long hours, of adrenaline, of the quiet, profound satisfaction of a life spent in the service of others. Our home was a sanctuary from the chaos, a place of peace and order. Our daughter, Helen, grew up in this environment. She was a sweet, gentle soul, perhaps a little overwhelmed by her two powerhouse parents. She did not inherit our love for the front lines. She became a librarian, a quiet curator of stories, a woman who preferred the calm order of the Dewey Decimal System to the messy, unpredictable world of human crisis. She met Edward in college. He was studying to be a civil engineer, a man who saw the world as a series of problems to be solved with logic, with mathematics, with concrete and steel. He was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly devoid of sentimentality. He was, in many ways, the human equivalent of a perfectly designed bridge, strong, efficient, and with no unnecessary ornamentation. I did not like him. I saw in him a rigidity, a lack of empathy that worried me. He did not seem to see my daughter, her gentleness, her quiet creativity, as a thing of beauty. He seemed to see her as a well-organized, low-maintenance component that would fit neatly into the efficient machine of the life he was planning. But Helen adored him. She saw his lack of emotion as a sign of strength. She saw his rigid planning as a form of security. She mistook his efficiency for love. After Michael passed away from a heart attack, a final, cruel irony, For a man who had run into burning buildings for a living, I continued to work for a few more years. But the light had gone out of my life. The work, once a source of profound purpose, became just a job. My own body began to betray me. The arthritis in my hands, a cruel joke for a woman whose hands had been her most valuable tools, became debilitating. My energy waned. The long 12-hour shifts became an agony. At the age of 75, I retired. For a few years, I lived on my own, in the small, tidy house Michael and I had shared. But a series of falls, a growing forgetfulness, the simple, grinding reality of an aging body, made it clear that I could no longer live alone. The decision for me to move in with Helen and Edward was presented, as always, as Edward's idea. A logical, practical, unavoidable conclusion. "Sylvia," he said to me one afternoon, in his clean, minimalist living room, a space that felt more like a corporate boardroom than a home. He had a spreadsheet open on his laptop. Of course he did. "I've run the numbers. The cost of in-home care versus the sale of your property and the consolidation of your assets into our household. The math is undeniable. This is the most efficient solution." Wes. The most efficient solution. He was talking about the final chapter of my life, as if it were a problem of fluid dynamics. Helen sat beside him, her hands twisting in her lap. "We want you with us, Mom," she said, her voice a soft, anxious echo of his pronouncement. "We'll worry about you." I looked at my daughter, at her kind, worried face, and I agreed. I let Edward, the engineer, deconstruct my life and reassemble it into a more efficient configuration. I sold my house. I gave away most of my possessions. I became a single, dependent variable in his complex equation. I moved into their guest room. It was a beautiful room, in a cold, sterile way. It had a private bathroom and a view of a perfectly manicured, perfectly soulless backyard. It was clear from the beginning that I was not a member of the family. I was a resident. A problem that had been efficiently solved. My life, once so filled with purpose and action, shrank to the four walls of that room. My days became a long, quiet, featureless expanse of time. I had nothing to do. No one to care for. No problems to solve. For the first time in my life, I was useless. And the feeling was a slow, creeping poison. Edward's attitude towards me was one of polite, professional tolerance, as long as I remained within my designated parameters. As long as I was quiet, unobtrusive, and made no demands on his time or his resources, he treated me with the cool, distant courtesy of a manager overseeing a piece of aging, but still functional, equipment. But as my needs inevitably grew, his tolerance began to wear thin. My arthritis worsened. I needed help with simple tasks, like opening a jar or buttoning my coat. My memory, which had once been a sharp, reliable instrument, began to fail me in small, frustrating ways. I would forget names, misplace my glasses, repeat stories. Each small failure, each new dependency, was a mark against me in Edward's mental ledger. He was an engineer. He despised inefficiency. He despised faulty equipment. And in his eyes, that is what I was becoming. His disapproval was not expressed in overt anger. It was expressed in 1,000 small, cutting ways. In the impatient sigh when I asked him to repeat something. In the way he would explain a simple concept to me in a loud, slow, patronizing voice, as if I were a child. In the way he would pointedly look at his watch whenever I was telling a story. He began to refer to my presence in the house as the situation. "Helen," I would overhear him say, his voice a low, controlled hum from his home office. "We need to discuss the Sylvia situation. Her medication costs were up 12% this quarter. Her utility consumption is not insignificant. We need to start thinking about a long-term, more cost-effective solution." He was talking about me as if I were a leaky pipe, a drain on the system's resources. He was engineering me out of my own life. The final, brutal verdict, the moment his quiet, utilitarian contempt finally found its voice, came on a rainy Wednesday. It was a small thing, a stupid thing, that brought it all to a head. I had been trying to be useful. It was a desperate, primal need, a need to feel that I still had a function. I had decided to make a pot of coffee, a simple task I had performed thousands of times. But my hands, my treacherous, arthritic hands, betrayed me. As I was pouring the water into the back of the expensive, complicated coffee machine, my hand spasmed. I dropped the glass carafe. It shattered on the pristine, white tile floor, sending a spray of glass and water across the perfect kitchen. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. Edward appeared in the doorway, almost instantly. He was dressed in a crisp, ironed shirt, ready for a day of important, useful work. He looked at the mess on the floor. He looked at me, standing there, trembling, a pathetic, useless old woman who couldn't even be trusted to pour water. His face did not register anger. It registered a kind of profound, weary disgust. The look of an engineer staring at a catastrophic and entirely predictable system failure. I'm so sorry, Edward, I stammered, my voice shaking. My hand, it just let go. He didn't look at me. He looked at the shattered glass. This machine, he said, his voice flat and cold, cost $400. The replacement carafe will be $65 plus shipping, an entirely unnecessary expense. He finally raised his eyes and looked at me, and there was no pity in them. There was no kindness. There was only a cold, hard, final assessment. You know, Sylvia, he said, his voice a quiet, clinical statement of fact. I have tried to be patient. I have tried to find a place for you in this house, a role for you to play. But there isn't one. You don't contribute. You don't produce. You only consume. You are a net drain on the household. You are useless. Useless. The word did not just hang in the air. It entered me. It was a poisoned dart, a shard of ice that pierced the very center of my being. Everything I had ever been, everything I had ever prided myself on, my competence, my strength, my 45 years of service, all of it was erased in that single, brutal, dispassionate word. He had looked at the sum of my life, and the answer he had come up with was 0. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of the coffee pot, and I felt something inside me shatter, something far more precious and irreplaceable than a glass carafe. It was my sense of self, my purpose, my reason for being. Helen came running in, her face a mask of alarm. She saw the mess, she saw my face, she saw the cold, hard look in her husband's eyes. What happened? She cried. Your mother, Edward said, his voice still a flat, cold monotone, has just cost us $65 plus shipping, and a significant amount of my time, which, as you know, is billed at $300 an hour. He turned and walked away, a man leaving the scene of a minor, irritating industrial accident. Helen rushed to my side. Oh, Mom, are you all right? Don't listen to him. He's just stressed. But I was not all right. I was mortally wounded. And his words were not the product of stress. They were the product of his soul. Later that day, after the mess had been cleaned up, after Edward had left for his important, useful job, I went into my bathroom. I looked at myself in the large, clean mirror over the sink. I saw the face of an old woman, a face etched with the lines of a long, and I had thought, a useful life. But now, all I could see was what he saw, a useless, broken thing, a faulty part, a net drain. I tried to smile, a small, sad, trembling smile, a smile of defiance, a smile that said, I am still here. I am still a person. But the smile felt like a lie. It was a ghost of an expression on a face that no longer had a purpose. I went back to my room, and I sat in my chair. And I felt myself begin to disappear, to fade, to become the ghost he had declared me to be. But as I sat there, in the quiet beige room, something else began to happen. The nurse in me, the fixer, the problem solver, began to stir. My body was useless. My hands were useless. My memory was useless. But my mind was still there. And my will. He had called me useless. He had reduced me, to a 0. Fine. Daddy. I would accept his verdict, but I would turn his own logic against him. I would become the most useless, the most unproductive, the most beautifully, terrifyingly, and utterly functionless thing in his entire efficient world. I would become a smile. Just a smile. A quiet, placid, knowing smile. A smile with no purpose other than to exist. A smile that would appear in the one place he could not avoid looking. The place where he went to see his own useful, important, and handsome face. I would haunt his reflection. I would become the ghost in his own machine. And I would prove to him that there is a great and terrible power in the things we deem useless. The day Edward called me useless was the day the old Sylvia, the nurse, the fixer, the competent, capable woman, finally died. Her death was not a dramatic, sudden event. It was a quiet, internal surrender. The machinery of her purpose, which had run so efficiently for 81 years, simply ground to a halt. The fire in the engine went out. In her place, something new and strange was born. It was not a ghost, not in the traditional sense. It was not the spirit of a dead person. It was the spirit of a living person who had been declared dead in all the ways that mattered. It was the spirit of a function that had been deemed obsolete. And it was a spirit that was, for the first time in its existence, utterly, beautifully, and terrifyingly free. Free from the need to be useful. Free from the need to contribute. Free to simply obey. My revenge, if you can call it that, was not born of a conscious, malicious plan. It was an instinct. The instinct of a disappearing thing to leave a mark. The instinct of a silenced voice to find a new way to be heard. I did not choose the medium of my haunting. It chose me. It chose the one place where a man like Edward, a man obsessed with his own image, his own success, his own perfect, handsome face, would be forced to look. It chose the mirror. The first visitation was subtle. So subtle that he dismissed it completely. It happened the morning after the coffee pot incident. Edward had a morning routine that was as rigid and as precise as a military drill. He would rise at 5:30 a.m., exercise for 30 minutes on his expensive rowing machine, shower, and then stand in front of the large, perfectly clean mirror in his master bathroom to shave. This was his time. A time of quiet, self-satisfied contemplation as he prepared his face for a day of important, useful work. He lathered his face with some expensive sandalwood-scented shaving cream. He picked up his razor. He leaned into the mirror, his face a mask of concentration. And as he looked into his own cool, gray engineer's eyes, he saw something flicker in the reflection. It was a slight, almost imperceptible distortion in the corner of his own reflected mouth. A tiny, upward curl. He blinked. He leaned closer. The distortion was gone. His reflection was, as it should be, serious, focused, important. He shook his head, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. A trick of the light. A smudge on the mirror. A symptom of a lack of sleep caused by the unnecessary drama of the previous day. He was a man who found rational explanations for everything. He finished his shave, his movements crisp and efficient, and he forgot all about it. But the seed had been planted. My haunting was a campaign of quiet, escalating presence. I did not need to do anything. I simply had to be. In the long, empty hours in my beige room, I would sit in my chair, and I would think about my smile. The smile I had tried to summon in the mirror after he had broken me. The small, sad, trembling smile of a woman trying to remember her own existence. I focused on that smile. I poured all my new, strange, functionless energy into it. I imagined it not as a physical expression, but as an idea, an essence, a quiet, persistent, useless piece of data, and I sent it out, a silent, invisible broadcast, into the reflective surfaces of his perfect, orderly house. The second visitation happened 2 days later. He was in his car, a late model, silver Audi, that he washed and waxed every Sunday. He was on his way to an important meeting, a meeting where he would present a complex, efficient, and highly profitable bridge design. He was feeling pleased with himself. He glanced at the rearview mirror to check the traffic behind him. And he saw it again. In the small, rectangular frame of the mirror, he saw his own face looking back at him. And superimposed over his own mouth, like a faint, ghostly double exposure, was my smile. It was not a grin. It was not a smirk. It was a quiet, placid, gentle smile. The smile of a person who is simply present. It was the most useless, functionless, and in that moment, the most terrifying expression he had ever seen. It did not mock him. It did not threaten him. It just was. He slammed on the brakes. The car behind him blared its horn. He stared into the mirror, his heart giving a sudden sharp jolt. The smile was gone. His reflection was his own again, his mouth a hard, straight line, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and anger. He pulled over to the side of the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He stared at his own reflection in the rearview mirror, in the side mirror, in the dark, blank screen of the car's navigation system. He saw only himself. He was shaken, deeply shaken. He told himself it was a hallucination, a symptom of stress. He was under a lot of pressure at work. This situation, with me at home, was an added, unwelcome complication. He was just tired. His brain was playing tricks on him. He took a few deep breaths, the engineer in him reasserting control, imposing order on the chaos of his own mind. He put the car back in gear and drove to his meeting. But, for the rest of the day, he found himself avoiding his own reflection. He would walk past a mirrored wall in his office building without looking. He would wash his hands in the executive washroom and keep his eyes fixed on the sink. He, a man who had always taken such pleasure in his own appearance, was suddenly afraid of what he might see. The smile began to appear more frequently. It was a patient, unpredictable ghost. It would find him in the most unexpected places. He would be at his desk, working on a complex schematic on his computer. The screen would go to sleep for a moment, the bright, complex drawing replaced by a black, reflective surface. And in that dark mirror, he would see his own face, with my quiet, placato smile hovering on his lips. He would yelp and hit the mouse, the screen flickering back to life, the smile vanishing into the bright, logical world of his work. He would be polishing his expensive leather dress shoes, a nightly ritual of order and control. He would look at the gleaming curved toe of the shoe, and in the dark, distorted reflection, he would see a tiny, warped version of my smile looking back at him. He would drop the shoe as if it had burned him. He began a quiet, frantic war against the reflective surfaces of his own home. He started taking his showers with the bathroom door slightly ajar, to prevent the mirror from steaming up. He would turn off the television when he wasn't watching it, unable to bear the blank, black screen. He started closing his laptop every time he stepped away from his desk. Helen, my daughter, noticed his strange new habits. "Edward, why are you suddenly so afraid of mirrors?" she asked one evening, a note of genuine, puzzled concern in her voice. "I'm not afraid of mirrors," he snapped, his voice sharp with a defensiveness that was entirely new. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm just conserving energy, reducing distractions." And he could not tell her the truth. How could he? How could he explain that he was being haunted by his mother-in-law's smile? A smile that only he could see. She would think he was losing his mind. And the terrifying part was, he was beginning to think so himself. His anger, with no rational target to aim at, began to curdle into a paranoid obsession. He started to watch me. He would observe me from a distance. His eyes narrowed, searching for a sign, a clue. He was looking for evidence of a prank, a complex, elaborate, and utterly impossible hoax. He would see me, sitting in my chair in my room, a quiet, still, and entirely unsmiling old woman. He would see me at the dinner table, my face a placid, neutral mask. The real physical me gave him nothing. I was a blank wall. My utter lack of expression, my complete and total uselessness, became in his mind the most incriminating evidence of all. She had to be doing it. But how? The first time he confronted me about it, his attempt at a logical, controlled interrogation quickly devolved into a display of his own unraveling sanity. He came into my room one afternoon. He closed the door behind him. He stood over my chair, his arms crossed, his face a mask of controlled fury. "All right, Sylvia," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "The game is over. I don't know how you're doing it. Some kind of technology? Some kind of projection device? But it stops. Now." I looked up at him, my face a perfect, placid mask of confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about, Edward," I said, my voice frail and soft. "Don't play dumb with me," he hissed, leaning closer, his face inches from mine. "The smile, your smile, in the mirrors. I see it, I know you're doing it." I continued to look at him, my expression unchanging. "I don't smile very much these days, Edward," I said quietly. "You have not given me much reason to." His face contorted with a frustration so profound, it was almost a physical agony. My placid, reasonable denial was a wall he could not break through. It was like arguing with a fog. "You are a clever, manipulative old woman," he spat. "But I will figure this out. I will prove it." He stormed out of the room, leaving me in a quiet, beige silence. I did not smile. Not on the outside. But on the inside, a quiet, placid, and utterly triumphant smile was blooming. He was losing control. The engineer was facing a problem he could not solve, a system he could not understand. The machine was haunted, and the ghost was a thing of pure, beautiful, terrifying uselessness. The haunting me began to change, to evolve. The smile became more personal, more invasive. It was no longer just a static, superimposed image. It began to interact with his own reflection. He would be brushing his teeth, and as he looked in the mirror, his own reflection would stop its motion, and it would turn its head slightly, and it would give him my quiet, knowing smile. He would spit toothpaste all over the sink, his heart hammering in his chest. He would be trying on a new tie, adjusting a knot in the mirror, and his reflection would raise its hand, his own hand, and it would gently touch the smile on its lips, a gesture of quiet, intimate acknowledgement. He was no longer just seeing my smile. He was becoming it. His own reflection was being possessed by my uselessness. His grip on reality began to slip. He started to avoid his own reflection at all costs. He covered the large mirror in their master bathroom with a towel. He turned all the framed pictures in his office to face the wall. He started wearing sunglasses inside the house. Helen was now seriously alarmed. Her husband, her strong, logical, unshakable husband, was behaving like a man on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. "Edward, you need help," she pleaded with him, her voice filled with a desperate, fearful love. "You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're talking to yourself. Please, let me make an appointment for you to see someone, a doctor, a therapist." "I don't need a therapist," he would roar. "I need an exorcist. She's done something to me. The old witch in the back room, she has cursed me." His accusations, once whispered in the privacy of their own arguments, now became loud, frantic, public pronouncements. He would stand in the hallway and scream at my closed door. "I know you can hear me. Stop it. Stop smiling at me." The breaking point, the moment the private haunting became a public spectacle, was his own 40th birthday party. Helen had planned a large, elegant party for him. She had invited all their friends, his colleagues, his clients. It was meant to be a celebration of his success, his importance, his usefulness. It became instead the stage for his final, spectacular unraveling. The house was filled with people. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. Edward moved through the crowd, a ghost at his own feast. His face was a pale, sweating mask of forced bonhomie. He avoided looking at any reflective surface. The large windows, the polished silver trays, the gleaming surfaces of the kitchen appliances. But the house was a hall of mirrors. He would catch a glimpse of himself in the glass of a picture frame, and he would see it, the quiet, placato smile. He would see his reflection in the curved bowl of a wine glass, and there it was, tiny and warped, but unmistakable. He was a man under siege, in his own home, surrounded by people who could not see the enemy that was staring at him from every corner. He fled to the downstairs powder room, seeking a moment of refuge. He locked the door. He leaned against the sink, his head in his hands, trying to breathe. He looked up, and he saw himself in the small, elegant mirror over the sink. His reflection was not smiling. It was laughing. Not a loud, boisterous laugh. A silent, internal, convulsive laugh. His own face, his own features, were contorted in a silent, mocking, hysterical glee. His shoulders were shaking. Tears of silent mirth were streaming down his reflected cheeks. And the smile, my smile, was wider, more triumphant than he had ever seen it. He let out a strangled, terrified cry. He did the only logical thing a man in his position could do. He attacked the mirror. He picked up a heavy ceramic soap dish and he hurled it at his own laughing face. The mirror shattered, a spiderweb of cracks erupting from the point of impact. But the reflection did not shatter. Through the web of cracks he could still see it. A dozen fractured, laughing Edwards, 100 splintered, triumphant smiles, all looking back at him. The sound of the shattering mirror brought Helen running. She and one of the guests managed to get the door open. They found him on the floor, amidst the shattered glass, sobbing, a broken, pathetic man, pointing a trembling finger at the ruined mirror. "Make it stop," he wept. "Please, just make it stop," smiling. The party ended in a chaos of whispers and worried glances. The story of Edward's breakdown, of his strange, violent war against a bathroom mirror, would be the talk of their social circle for months. His reputation as a strong, stable, logical man was shattered, as completely and as irrevocably as the mirror itself. I, of course, had seen none of it. I had remained in my room, a quiet, useless, and entirely innocent old woman. When Helen came to my room later that night, her face streaked with tears, to tell me that Edward was unwell, that he had been taken to a private hospital for rest and evaluation, I simply patted her hand and offered her a cup of tea. My face, I am sure, was a perfect placid mask of gentle concern. But on the inside, in the quiet, secret, and finally peaceful place where my own spirit resided, I was smiling. A quiet, placato, and utterly useless smile. And I knew, with a certainty that was as calm and as clear as a reflection in a still pond, that wherever Edward went, whatever he did, for the rest of his life, he would never be able to look away from it. The aftermath of Edward's breakdown was quiet and desolate. The beautiful, minimalist house, once a shrine to his control, became a silent, tense hospital ward. He returned after a week from the private facility, armed with a diagnosis of acute stress-induced psychoses and a prescription for powerful antipsychotic medication. He was a changed man. The sharp, confident edge was gone, replaced by a dull, haunted weariness. He moved through his own home like a ghost, his eyes constantly darting away from any reflective surface. He had covered all the major mirrors in the house with blankets and sheets, a constant, funereal reminder of his own broken sanity. But it was a futile gesture. The smile was not in the mirrors anymore. It was in his mind. He would catch a glimpse of it in the polished back of a spoon, in a puddle of water on the driveway, in the dark, unblinking eye of the television screen. My quiet, useless smile had become the inescapable screensaver of his soul. Our roles in the house were reversed. I, the useless, broken component, became the still, quiet center of the household. And he, the master of the machine, became the faulty part, the source of all the chaos and anxiety. He stopped going to work. The man who had defined his entire existence by his productivity now spent his days sitting in a darkened room, staring at a wall. His firm placed him on indefinite medical leave. His perfect, efficient life had been completely and utterly derailed by a thing with no purpose, no function, no logic. Helen, my daughter, was trapped between her broken husband and her silent, watchful mother. She became his caregiver, a role she performed with a tired, dutiful resignation. She would crush his pills into his food, just as he had once suggested she do for me. She would speak to him in a soft, gentle, patronizing voice, the same voice he had once used on me. The irony was a quiet, constant hum in the background of our new lives. One evening, she came into my room. She sat in the chair opposite me, her hands twisting in her lap. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the quiet hum of the air conditioning. "It was you, wasn't it, Mom?" she finally whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. It was not an accusation. It was a question born of a deep, dawning, and terrified understanding. I looked at my daughter, at her tired, sad face, and I felt a wave of love and pity for her. She was a casualty in a war she had not understood. I did not answer her with words. I simply looked at her, and for the first time, in a very long time, I let a real, physical smile touch my lips. It was a small, sad, gentle smile. She saw it, and her eyes filled with tears. She didn't need any other confession. She understood. She stood up, came over to me, and for the first time since I had moved into her house, she hugged me. A real hug. The hug of a daughter who was finally, truly, seeing her mother. The end of the story is a quiet one. There were no more dramatic confrontations. There was no final victory. There was only a slow, sad, inevitable decay. Edward's condition did not improve. He could not escape my smile. It was the ghost in his own reflection, a constant reminder of his own cruelty, his own failure. He had judged my life and found it useless, and in doing so, he had rendered his own life unlivable. A year after his breakdown, he was moved to a long-term care facility, a place with soft walls and no mirrors. Helen and I sold the big glass house. We sold the minimalist furniture and the abstract art. We moved into a small, comfortable apartment, filled with books and music, and the warm, comfortable clutter of two women rebuilding a life. I have my own room. It is not beige. It is a soft, cheerful yellow. And I have filled it with my things. My photograph. My knitting. The small, useless, beautiful objects that tell the story of my life. My hands still ache with arthritis. My body is still slow and frail. But I am not useless. I have learned that a person's worth is not measured by their function, by their productivity, by the noise they make in the world. It is measured by their presence, by their spirit, by the quiet, unkillable light of their own existence. He tried to erase me, to define me by my limitations, but he forgot that even a ghost can smile. And a smile, a quiet, persistent, unexplainable smile, can be a more powerful, more terrifying, and more revolutionary act than any grand, useful deed. It is a quiet declaration of being. And it is a haunting that no one, not even the most logical of men, can ever truly explain away. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me. It is a gift beyond measure. Please, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click that notification bell so that you never miss a story. In the comments below, I want you to share one thing that someone once told you was useless, but that brings you great joy. Let's celebrate the beautiful, functionless things that make life worth living. Love you all. This is Grandma Sylvia, and I'll see you in the next story.